and welcome to today's video. So from the outset, there is a couple of things that my channel doesn't specialise in, and indeed I don't specialise in, and one of them is mountain bike servicing and repairs, because I'll be honest, it's not an area that I am absolutely 100% familiar with, and is a bit of a minefield when it comes to sort of choosing components to replace, say, these hydraulic brake calipers, for example. Now, this is a Cannondale F500, I think. It's got a very nice aluminium frame. The one thing I do know is that Cannondale is a quality mountain bike manufacturer, so that's something. It also has this rather unusual monoshock setup, which is quite unusual and certainly still seems to work okay. So that's certainly not something that I'm going to be replacing unless it's absolutely knackered. The one thing I might do is actually look up on how to strip this down and service it, indeed if there are any user serviceable parts. The other thing that I want to do is basically to strip the cog cassette off the back of the bike, and also service the cone bearings. So basically the cone bearings live inside of the hub itself, and they tend to need to be sort of cleaned up and re-greased every once in a while. You can actually get the individual ball bearings to replace them. The cones are cone shaped and actually sit and keep the bearings in place, and then obviously you tighten them ever so slightly to maintain the tension on the bearings, but you don't want them too tight to the point where the rear wheel will no longer go round. At the moment, due to the age of these brake calipers, the calipers the pistons have actually stuck out slightly, and they've got a bit of corrosion on them, so they no longer retract fully into the caliper. Now these calipers, certainly the front caliper, I'm not sure about the rear is as well. These are Hayes 9 calipers, which are apparently quite rare. Well, not rare, apparently quite retro and quite expensive to get parts for. So I've done a bit of digging online and I found a good set of budget hydraulic calipers which seem to get good reviews, and I'm going to replace the discs and calipers with those for the moment. These ones I will take off, and at some point I will strip both the front and rear set down and replace them. Now, because this particular bike has got quick release spindles, it's not actually going to be too difficult to take the wheels off. So basically I want to take the wheels off so that I can actually start looking at stripping those hubs down. Now, that front one has come off easily enough. Now, one of these stands is actually quite a good investment because it does allow you to keep the bike off the ground and easily remove parts for servicing purposes. The chain itself, now there should be somewhere along the chain, there it is. So this link here is the one that you would, this one here is the link that you would use a chain separation tool to drive out, and we'll be covering that in a future episode in this mini-series. Now, centre bearings have always been one that has eluded me, and this one is a sealed unit, and to be honest, I don't think I'm going to touch it because it is smooth and quiet, and this bike has not done that many miles since its last service. In fact, to be honest with you, it has been sat in my shed for a number of years before moving house, and because I'm getting a little bit fatter, let's say, I've decided to try and get back into cycling again, which was something I used to do a lot when I was younger. So I'm just going to get this off. I need 2 hands to do that, and as you can see, that should come away. You will need another hand just to loop the chain up, and then that comes away, and basically you're just left with the bare bike frame. Now, one thing I will do is actually get an Allen key onto these and just remove this caliper, because that's going to need to be replaced. As you can see, the cable runs up here, across the top crossbar, and then over here to the brake lever here. And because they are hydraulic, you've got a bleed nipple here, and on the actual brake lever itself there is a little rubber bung, which I'll just show you a second. So I think I've got, here it is, I've got the front one in this bag, which I need to rebuild at some point. But as you can see, you have on here a little rubber bung, and you get this syringe filled with either mineral oil or brake fluid. It can depend, obviously it depends on the type of caliper as to what type of fluid it uses. The .4 and .5 brake fluid is less hygroscopic than the mineral oil, so if you are looking for hydraulic brakes, go for one that uses .4 and .5 brake fluid. Now, the mineral oil ones do seem to be absolutely fine as well. In fact, I'm using, I've actually bought the mineral oil variety, so it isn't the end of the world if you do go for the mineral oil ones. Now, the thing about brake fluid, as you'll probably know from a lot of my car videos, is it does damage paintwork. So, like with cars, you want to keep it very much separated from the paintwork of your bike. Now, I actually stripped one of these calipers down, and this is pretty much what they look like inside. Got a little tiny hole here, which usually has a rubber seal around it, which basically allows fluid to flow from this side over to the other side. This is a piston which is actually seized into this caliper, so I'm going to need to drill a little hole into here, tap a screw into it, and then try and pull it out that way. And on the other side you've got, over here, this is pretty much what this one looks like. So this caliper, or this piston rather, it's also a little bit seized in there as well. You can get the rebuild kits for these, but the rebuild kits were actually coming out at more than it would have cost to buy a good set of budget hydraulic brakes. So I went for the budget option. So I've got the wheels off, and at the moment I don't need to do anything else with this. I just need to put this frame out of the way somewhere where it shall be safe and, well, out of the way. So I'll just get that sorted out, get my workbench available, and then we can look at stripping down these wheels. So a number of years ago I actually purchased one of these, which I've used a few times in the past, and it contains the majority of tools that you would need for servicing your bike. So let's have a look at what we got in here. We got this large Allen key. These are used when you're removing the freewheel unit on the rear hub. So some rear wheels actually have a freewheel unit that can be removed independent of the wheel itself. Some cheaper wheels actually just have the freewheel unit actually built into the wheel itself, so you can't remove them. That isn't part of it. Allen key, so I think that one will go there. So simple Allen key, simple flat blade screwdriver, a set of cone spanners. So these are used when you're tightening up the cones for the wheel bearings. These are used for removing the rear cassette, so we'll be using one of those in a minute. This is a spoke tightening tool, covers various different sizes of spoke, and I'm not sure what this does, I'll be honest with you. Somebody might be able to tell me in the comments, but yeah, I'll be honest, I do not know what this does. It looks like it is some kind of puller. That might be to remove the central bottom bracket cassette. This is for older bottom brackets which were not case units like the one I've got, and this is just quite simply a chain whip. Now, I thought I had somewhere in here as well an actual chain removal tool, and I have a feeling I know where that is, and it's not in a place where I want it to be, so we're going to have to clean the chain actually on the frame itself. So thankfully we don't need to remove the chain at the moment, but you do want within your collection a chain separation tool. So where it's actually gone in my case is I used to carry on the back of the bike a little sort of pannier thing, and I kept a chain, actually kept a spare chain with me, and also kept a chain tool as well, so I could quickly remove the chain at the side of the road and replace it if I was caught out at all. Modern chains, certainly for cassettes which have got more sort of gears on them, actually the chain itself is a lot thinner, and I found out to my detriment that the chain would more easily snap in that instance. It's also this combined 15mm, 14mm and 15mm spanner socket combo, and also a set of tyre levers as well. So we've got the main essentials to do what I want to do today, and I can't remember where I put my bag thing that had all of the cycling stuff in it. It might still be in storage. There's also the possibility it might be even somewhere in this garage, so who knows where that's gone. But it's not the end of the world because they're not expensive. So I've got a couple of bits and bobs which I've purchased. So the first one is some thread lock. Now you'll need that for when you're reassembling the brake calipers. Second major item is a full set of Clark's front and rear hydraulic brakes. They basically contain the caliper and brake lever assembly for both front and rear, including brackets, and also pre-thread locked fitments, as you can see there. Also comes with a set of discs, and you've got a smaller disc for the rear, larger disc for the front, as you can see there. So we'll be fitting those at some point as well. What I also have is contained in here, so let's see what this is. This is, once it's opened, that is a mineral oil bleed kit. So this Clark's system actually uses mineral oil. So as you can see, hopefully on the label there, and I've invested in this mineral oil bleed kit should I need it for the future. And you can see the arrangement of the two syringes, the mineral oil, and then a selection of screw-in fitments there, which you would obviously connect your syringe to. And then I'm guessing the assumption is you pump it through till you get fresh oil coming out the other end at the caliper, and then seal it very much like you would when bleeding a car's brakes, albeit on a far simpler, far smaller scale. So I've also got the old caliper and the brackets as well, so I've kept these brackets and I've kept the fittings just in case I need to swap them over. But to be honest with you, it's unlikely that I'll need to borrow those for any reason, because I think the new kit does actually seem to come with its own fitments, so we should be okay on that front. Also got another box here, and this box has some of the essential fluids that you'll probably need. And let's just have a quick look inside of that. So we have some bike grease. That's for your cone bearings. Got a big WD-40, which I won't be using to lubricate the bike. You don't want to use WD-40, you don't want to use 3-in-1 oil. You want to use a specific bike lubricant, depending on the type of riding that you're going to be doing. You can get a dry lubricant, which is ideal for the summer months, and you can get a wet lubricant, which is perfect for the winter months. So it's sort of basically it's the way that it stays on the chain itself. I think I might still have some of my wet lubricant, and that's my preferred go-to even in the summer months, or certainly was when I was doing a lot of cycling to work every day. That was my go-to lubricant because it was persistent, let's say. It would actually stay on the chain. So let's see if I still have some. And believe it or not, I do. So this is the stuff that I've been using. It's Finish Line Ceramic Wet Chain Lube. This is actually copyright 2011, so it's very likely that it has been superseded by new formulations. And I think, yeah, there is definitely still some in there, so it'll be enough to get me started, certainly. So let's get the various boxes and bits out of the way, and we're going to start easy. We're going to start with the front wheel. So here's the front wheel. Now we will need to remove the brake disc, but the first thing that we're going to do is just remove, it's either called a spindle or a skewer. It depends on where you read. So I'm going to move the quick release skewer / spindle and just make sure, just to keep it like that so that it doesn't go missing. Now this actually uses what looks like Torx screws to hold the brake disc in place, and there's also a direction of rotation on these brake discs as well. These are actually Shimano discs, so they're quite a good disc, and I'm not going to bin them. I'm going to remove them so I can put the correct replacement discs on there for the new arrangement, but I'm not going to bin them or anything like that. I want to keep them if possible. The other thing that you do want to find is something like a nice cream tub that you can put all of the fittings and bearings into for cleaning purposes. So I think I've got something suitable somewhere. I will just go and find that a second. Right, so I've got something suitable. And I'll start by removing this nut here. There we go. And you can see there's your cone bearing there. And on this one it's actually finger tight, which is, I'll be honest with you, not unexpected. On bikes you tend to find you have to have the cone bearing not 100% tight, because when you actually put the skewer through and you use the quick release to tighten everything up, the action, from what I've discovered, of the quick release pressing on the forks ultimately presses down onto here and locks everything into place. So don't worry if you come to it and you find that the two nuts and indeed the cones are very, very loose. From my experience, even on bikes that have been shop serviced, and I've come to work on them after rather than going back to the store, it's quite possible that they will be loose. That is something that I've come to expect, and from my limited understanding, it's actually normal. So I'm going on this side to use, if I just come up, pan up here, it's going to use one of these cone spanners that you can see there. Now they do accommodate different sizes of cones, and this one, which accommodates this one here, you can see there, I can just spin that off and out like so. And after a short time, the actual axle tube itself will come out. As you can see, you can take the cone out as well. And then you have access to those little bearings. So here's the axle. Oops, sorry. Here's the axle. There's the cone. And we can put those to one side for degreasing in a moment. And we'll just pan back down. Now, the bearing balls themselves are contained underneath this little cover, and what you need to do is, using a flat object like this screwdriver, very gently try and prise up the cover itself. If you can't, don't worry, because they don't always come up. So what you can do is you can actually just fish out the bearings individually, but to be perfectly honest with you, I much prefer to be able to get the cover up. In fact, you can see here there is a bearing that's escaped inside the hub itself. So there's one there. This is where a little screwdriver and a little amount of grease come in handy, so you can actually recover bearings which have decided to go inside the hub itself. So I'm going to gently try and drift this out, and if it is going to be stiff at all, we can use a little bit of WD-40 just to loosen it up a touch. So I'll just get WD-40 nozzle in place. There we go. Let that settle in for a bit. And I'll actually use a flat blade screwdriver that's got a slightly thicker there we go. It will suddenly do that, so don't be surprised if that happens. And that's the top cap itself. Now what you can see is, you can see all of the little ball bearings are in there. One of my ball bearings has gone missing somewhere, so I'll need to find that in a moment. You can get, if you happen to lose these for any reason, you can get all of the bearings individually. And so, to be honest with you, don't worry if they go missing. You can get a set from bike store or online. Now these ones are in reasonable shape. They're still nice silver and shiny. If they contain any surface rust, or any sort of, if you look at them closely, if they are scored for any reason, so if they've got sort of pits and imperfections, then you will want to replace them. If they are rusty, that does suggest that there has been water ingress into the hub itself, and there has not been possibly enough grease to keep that water at bay. So that's just something to bear in mind. Now I'm just looking, it actually does look like I have lost that errant ball bearing, but I did find, when I was obviously stripping it down, an extra bearing inside of the hub itself, so I should have enough for when I put it back together. So I'll just give that a cursory wipe down like so. And obviously what you want to do as well is just examine this in a race, make sure that it's clean make sure that it's free of scoring and free of rust. Same scenario, but on the other side now. So you can see on the other side we do have a full set of bearings in there, and I don't want to lose them, so I'm going to do this time. And that actually went a lot better. So there's your top cap, and then you've got your individual ball bearings. One of the bearings came away with said top cap. This is actually where a magnetic tipped screwdriver comes in handy. Same scenario again, make sure that the bearings are free from rust. You do sometimes find surface rust on them, but if the grease has been doing its job, that surface rust will be very non-persistent. It will almost be sort of like runny, watery grease. It'll be brown in colour. I mean, you can probably see in here there is some evidence of that sort of brown, greasy substance. So the grease has actually been doing its job. And because the bike hasn't been ridden, certainly by me, in wet conditions, it shouldn't actually be too bad. So, got this bike degreaser. Other degreasers are available. Brake fluid, sorry, not brake fluid, brake cleaner is another good one to use. There we go, so there's that one. And that one. We'll just leave those to soak in for a little bit. I've just realised some of that's gone onto my iMac, just onto the CRT, so it's not the end of the world. In fact, actually does quite a nice job of cleaning that. I will put something on that to cover it up. So, for the minute, we can move this out of the way, and we can focus on getting these cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out cloth like so. I'm going to tip all of those onto the cloth like this, or like so rather. Don't worry if this one doesn't come off, that's also perfectly normal. You will find that one end is stiffer than the other. In fact, that's actually quite a good thing, because it makes it easier to put the cones back in again. I'll just give this going over like so. Just remove any bits there that shouldn't be there. Then just, just wipe it down. So you can see on this one we've got a bit of caked in grease. That's quite old grease, as you can see. So you want to work that out if you can. So I'm just going to use the cloth to do that. Make sure that your cones are clean as well. You also want to make sure, as regards the cones, that the race on the cones is also free from scoring and corrosion and anything else that could affect the quality of the bearing race itself. So we'll give that a wipe now. You also want to, if you can, just wipe each ball bearing like so. You also want to get rid of the grease from these caps, and the way I do that is I just use a screwdriver and then just go round like so, and then take that grease out. You can see that some of it has actually begun to clump, as grease tends to do as it gets older. So it just sort of tends to dry and clump, especially if the bike has not been ridden for a while, which this one has not been ridden for a number of years, and that's why I'm giving it this basic service. There we go. I'll just do this one as well. Try and get rid of as much of that as possible. Same story with this cap. Yeah, you can see a lot of that is very dry and very disgusting. So it appears to me that this would have been right on the edge of usability anyway, this grease. So it was due its strip down and service. How often do you want to do this? So it depends on how often you're riding the bike. When I used to cycle to work and back, which was about 10 miles a day, I used to do this every 3 months. But to be honest with you, if you're only using the bike in the summer, once before your cycling season is usually enough, especially if you're not doing any sort of hard off-road riding. If you're doing a lot of off-road riding and you're getting the bike absolutely soaked, then there is a possibility that you may need to strip it down every time you've been out. I don't know how true that is, but you need to do it more frequently. I'd sort of probably say in that instance, if you're sort of using it every weekend and you're using it hard, then yeah, you'd probably want to do it sort of at least once a month. Really sort of depends. But to be honest, for you know, for the average sort of weekend summer cyclist with just light duty cycling, once a year is probably enough. Twice a year if you're using it in winter, so you might want to sort of give it a strip down and a full re-grease before the winter months, and then obviously do it after winter is finished and it returns to spring. There we go. Right, so don't forget your spindle as well, so you might want to just make sure that that's free from rust and make sure that it's clean. If you get anything a little bit like this, which is very, very, very unenthusiastic surface rust, don't worry too much. The spindle will last. They're also very easy to replace. You literally just sort of take the spindle out and pop a new one in. They are that easy to sort out. So this has actually been down on the floor drying out, and I'm just going to move this over to one side, making sure not to lose any of those ball bearings, as you can see. Keep those on there. Let's move my various sprays out of the way and then just get this into a position where I can start putting things back together again. So I'm going to be removing the brake disc, so it doesn't matter too much that it has grease on it. If you were doing this, you would want to, once you've reassembled, to get a bit of degrease, or actually brake cleaner, be a really good one to get onto your rag, and then just wipe around the disc like so, making sure to get both sides of the disc. In this instance though, we're going to grab some of our grease and there's a little cap on there that you need to pop off before you start. And I'm going to run some grease around like so. There we go. So I'm not going mad and I'm not really filling it up with grease. What I'm doing is putting in a bit of grease so that I can then start to pop in the individual little bearing balls, and the grease will hold them in place. So before putting these in, I'm going to give them the final dry with another clean rag. And that also acts as giving them a final clean as well. And quite literally just pop them in like so. So you want them close together, and you will know when you've got enough in there, because you would have gone you literally would have gone back around to the other side. So that's the way you would know. So we'll grab a few more. Now if you have, when you're cycling along, if you have sort of like a clacking noise from the front wheel, it's usually because you're missing one of these little ball bearings. So it'll make a sort of characteristic clacking noise, and you'll actually discover it once you've got the cover off. You'll probably notice that you're missing an entire ball bearing. As I say, don't worry if they are missing, because replacements are pennies and readily available. There we go, so a couple more to pop in. And that should, there you go, that should be the lot. So there we go, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it looks like there's 11 in this one. Now both of these end caps are the same, so it doesn't matter which one I put back on. But certainly what I want to do with the end caps is to just load them up with some grease. And I'm also going to plop a bit of grease over here as well. And what I'll be doing with that is just gently running it over like so, so that those bearings are now nicely encased inside some grease. And then we'll pop this on, and it will just push back into place like so. So you don't need to drive it in or push it in or ram it in or anything like that. It is literally just a push fit. And that's the thing that you notice when you're working on push bikes as opposed to cars. Everything doesn't seem to be done up to very much torque. In fact, some things are just literally hand tight with a hand tool, and that's all you need. If you go any tighter, you tend to start breaking things, and that's where the problems and misery can come in. So we'll just do this one now. There we go. Grab our bearings. Obviously make sure they are cleaned before putting them on and dry. And then start to pop them into the grease, like so. Now I do have a load more, and hopefully I have enough to fully replace everything that's in there. Because there was that extra ball bearing that escaped into the hub itself. In fact, I've just noticed there's another one in there. So if I grab my screwdriver again, I should be able to rescue two of them actually. This is the sort of thing that can happen. You can actually lose the bearings inside the hubs themselves. And if you're a bike shop with you know, a selection of these little fellas just stuffed into a box, rather than fish it out, because obviously time's money, just stick a new one in. They're sub pennies, quite literally. That one there is probably a little bit scored actually, so it should be okay. See, I've just dropped one in there. It should be okay, but the next time around, next time I do this, I'll probably replace all of the bearings as a matter of purpose, or a matter of just replacing them. So we'll run a nice bit of grease over the top, and then just gently work that into there, like so. And then you can grab your cap, make sure that that is dry from the degreaser, and then just put a bit of this into the cap itself, and pop that onto there, and it should clonk satisfyingly into place like that. It does make a nice satisfying clonk. Something else I like to do is just run a final bit of grease like that. And also just do the same on the other side. And now we're in a position where this can go back in. So this is our axle. Quite literally just cover that with a bit of grease, work it into the axle, and then feed the axle down through the hub and out the other side. Now flip it over, grab your cone, and you want to put it in so you've got the race side going into the hub like so. So because I've got some grease on my fingers, I'm just going to cover it with some grease and then just screw it down like so. So finger tight initially. Do not worry if you see loads of grease splodging out like so. Perfectly normal. So that's as far as it will go, and I'll be honest, it's not going to be that far in. The one thing I like to do is make sure when I pop on, I'll just pan this up here a second so hopefully you can see this. So you see on this side that screw has been left in place, or bolt, or nut rather. Now on the other side I'm going to pop on the other nut onto the other end of this axle spindle, and what I tend to aim for is an equal number of threads here and here as far as possible. The other thing I want to aim for is a free moving axle spindle, and you can see at the moment that that isn't moving that freely. So to correct that, pop this out like so, pop this off, wind the cone back about half a turn like so, so it's not, you know, it's not moving excessively, but there's enough on there so that it moves freely. Then tighten that, and there you go. And on both sides you have roughly the same amount of play, and you can basically tighten both these nuts together. So you want to get a spanner on either end to tighten them down, and you've got no excessive side by side movement. And this is where your cone spanner comes into play, because you don't want excessive side-by-side movement, but you do want enough free movement of the axle itself. So, hang on a minute, sorry, I think I'm using the wrong, that's better. So you just want to go in with the cone slightly like so, and then tighten that down. That is too tight, so come out again with that, come out again with the cone, and that has got ever so slight amount of sideways movement, so off again with that, and touching the cone there, lock it off, and eventually you will have something that's free moving, but doesn't move excessively side to side. So you see that's too tight, so you want to back out a quarter of a turn, I'd say. Back that out, still too tight, back out, in, still too tight, then out a touch again, in again, and eventually what you will find is you'll have something that does move freely. The problem is it's a balancing act. And that is just something you have to be wary of. In fact, there is where I had it before. In fact, there, that's too far. That is spot on. Up there. There you go. And that's that. So really, that's just how tricky it is, or it can be, to get one of these sorted out. So what I should be able to do, I'm hoping I've got the, so you might need another spanner just to lock those in place, but to be honest, that is now done. So don't worry if it takes a little while, because it might. But the main thing that you want is equal amount of threads either side as far as possible, and not a huge amount of sideways movement in the hub itself, but free movement like so. And then the final thing, I just pop a bit of grease, not huge amounts, but a smear of grease onto the spindle, or the skewer, whatever you want to call it. Wipe it in. Make sure that that spring sits like so. And then you go through. Out the other side, there will be another spring, which you just need to pop into the same way. And whoops. There you go. Making sure that still freely moves. Now when you come to put it back on the bike, you might find that you're going to have to get your cone spanners and other spanners out again, to, when you're tightening the quick release, to basically gently adjust off the cones and the nuts and then tighten the quick release. As I said earlier, the act of tightening the quick release does bring the frame forks together, which squeezes it all into place. So that's just something to be aware of, and don't worry if it takes a little bit of sorting out to get it 100%. It's perfectly normal and seems to be one of the perils of servicing your own bike.